Hello, thank you so much for joining us for this online message this weekend. As always, if you're out of town, and it is Memorial Day weekend, so I have to assume that more folks are going to be out of town. Thank you for watching this, carving out the time. If you're not feeling well, and that might be the case as well, hope you're able to join us. Either way, we hope you're able to join us as soon as possible back in this big room, and we can meet together. All right, when it comes to announcements, or I better said opportunities. Wednesday night we have prayer house. Friday morning is the men's study. And then Saturday morning we're going for another walk in the woods. We meet at 8:30 behind the Hershey Med Center. We go for a walk. We have great conversations, but we also just put ourselves in a place where we can experience God in nature. And you'd be surprised the depth of the woods, if you will, behind the medical center. And then afterwards, we're going to hook up at the Inglewood Cafe for coffee and smoothies. So if that sounds good, come join us for that. All right, I have a kind of silly way to help us remember the five purposes of the church. You say, why does the church exist? Well, there's 5 reasons you could make an argument why the church exists. And unfortunately, for me to help you remember, I've come up with kind of a silly thing. All right, so 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. We remember that. You might remember the year just because of that little poem. What 3 ships did he ride over in? Do you know the name of the 3 ships? It was the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, which I think was the flagship, the main one. Again, so there's, it sounds so silly, 5 reasons for the church. I want you to remember the 3 ships, all right? The same way Columbus had 3 ships, there's 3 ships or 3 different reasons why the church exists. To worship, fellowship, and discipleship. Now, we have spent the last 3 weeks talking basically about those 3 ships. We're here to worship. We're here to enjoy fellowship, and we're here to, in the emphasis or in the endeavor of discipleship. So I want you to remember the 3 ships, if that helps. Now, there's 2 other reasons why, and we're going to hit that one of those this weekend. And the next 2 are 2 specific S actions. They're words that begin with the letter S. This week, we're going to be talking about serving, all right? So the church exists for worship, fellowship, discipleship, and this S word, serving. Now, worship is kind of our upward expression. Fellowship is kind of our around word expression, and I know around word is not a proper word. Discipleship is an inward thing. Serving is more of the outward, all right? How do we grow deeper roots, deeper conviction in our serving and ministry to others? And that's our outward expression. So there's upward, aroundward, inward, and now as we talk about serving, we're going to talk about the outward expression. So the question is, how do we grow in our serving to help enable the transformation of our heart? And here's the secret, that serving is good for us, not just those that we serve. In fact, you could look at even secular worldly folks have figured this out, that when we get our attention and when we serve other people, actually there's a benefit for us. All right, so let's talk about serving and this outward expression of our faith. Galatians 5:13 says this: you, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free. We celebrate that. But do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. We have a freedom for service, not a freedom from service. All right? So Paul says, do not use your freedom. Again, there's a little bit of a paradox or a contradiction that's found in our freedom. Our freedom is not a freedom to do whatever we want, but it's a freedom from the power of sin. So when we talk about Christian freedom, it's not a freedom to just live our lives any which way that we want, knowing we're going to be forgiven. That's taking advantage for grace. There's a twist to that, a taint to that. But It's a freedom from the power of sin. We need to keep that in mind. Grace is amazing, but unfortunately, grace is often underestimated. We don't always recognize our identity because of it, but also grace can be taken advantage of. So the question I'll start us off with is how do you kind of do both? How do you underestimate God's grace? If you ever feel like you got to earn God's favor on this side of the cross, maybe there's some growth for you in your understanding of the depth and width of God's grace. But also, how do we take advantage of grace? That also might be a very real temptation for us. So we need to have a proper understanding of what does it mean that we are free. We're not free to do whatever we want. We have a freedom from the power of sin. That freedom from the power of sin should actually propel us to be more intentional about serving. It says, do not indulge. Now, another couple words for indulge are pamper or satisfy. Don't indulge the flesh. Don't pamper it. Don't satisfy the flesh. These are natural human desires that we have. The words indulge and pamper are often words, unfortunately, kind of associated with a spoiled child. Indulge means a lack of restraint, and what it does, it reveals our selfish desires. Okay, so when we indulge our human desires, we're revealing the selfish desires that we have. Our selfish desires, in turn, reveal oftentimes a lack of concern for other people. And we kind of live with blinders on in that we only see what we want to see, and we're not looking to see the needs of other people. So we need to be careful that we don't indulge our flesh because, again, it could be an indicative pattern, or not a pattern, a sign, a diagnostic maybe even, for do you have a concern for other people? And then he goes on, serve one another humbly. Rather, instead of serving our own desires, we voluntarily choose to serve the well-being of others. Okay? So Paul makes it clear, don't abuse your freedom, don't indulge your flesh, and serve one another with humility. And we could talk a long time even about that. So why should we serve? Now, it's not a bad question, and it's fair to ask. We have this is what Jesus had to say. There's this really interesting story with James and John and Jesus, where James and John asked for places of importance. They want to sit at the right and left hand of Jesus. When his kingdom comes, they think they want to be people of importance here in the world. And this is what Jesus has to say in Mark 10, 43 through 45. But among you, it will be different, not like the world. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first among you must be a slave to everyone else. For even the Son of Man has not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Why are we to serve other people? Well, a couple things. It imitates Jesus. That's a good enough reason. But it actually exalts us. And that's a really interesting thing. If you want to be great in God's kingdom, you need to be willing to serve. And again, he just turns the world's values, he turns culture's values upside down. It's 180-degree different from what the world thinks. Then James 1, I don't even know this was coming. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless as this is to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself by being polluted by the world. He talks about what is practical and pure religion. And we've said this so many times. If someone describes you as religious, that may not be a compliment. That just means you simply go to church, okay? Or that maybe there's a focus on behavior, even an unhealthy way. But authentic religion is not just about church and religious rituals. James is writing to a people that were good at talking about their faith, and maybe he still does. He defines pure religion not by rituals or theological debates, but by showing mercy. That's how we show our faith. What does the world want? It wants to see genuine, authentic, or real unvarnished and honest people. The world wants to see Christians without wearing masks, pretending that everything is great. Who are the orphans and the widows? They represent the vulnerable, the needy, anyone who we can do something for, but who can give us nothing in return. Okay? We need to do, as a church, capital C church, the American church, we need to do a better job serving each other, much less the world. But it's serving people who can't give us anything in return. And then, James points out the importance of moral integrity. It'd be easy to skip over this phrase because obviously this message is on serving. But the second half of this verse, it balances social action with personal holiness. We're called to engage with the world's needs without adopting the world's values. So we need to be doing both, serving the world, making a difference, but also being aware and cognizant about where we at in our own spiritual walk. We need to do both. So the connection between these three passages, these verses, bridge the gap between what we might say is an internal belief, I know what I'm supposed to do, and then the actual external action. This Galatians passage gives us the motivation. We're to serve humbly, driven by our love. That's the how. The Mark passage, Jesus gives us a reason to imitate him and to be exalted, kind of addresses the why. And then James gives us the application to help those who are vulnerable. Let's just say those who have a need. It might even be something as insignificant as somebody here at the church needing a ride on a Sunday morning. Not a big, heavy ask, but anyone who needs help. That's the who part. So what now? Here's the thing. It's real easy to kind of approach us as sometimes a doctor would. A doctor can address a symptom without really addressing the cause. And unfortunately, sometimes in this world where it's medicine or other things, we're just always dealing with the symptoms and not really the cause. And pastors can be just as guilty of this. We can address the problem by saying, serve more. Everybody, you need to serve more. Without addressing the cause of why don't we serve more. So I'm going to spend some time, actually the rest of our time together, kind of addressing the different reasons why we don't serve more. Instead of just giving you the charge to go serve more, let's address the things that kind of get in the way. These are some of the common excuses or reasons given why Christians give for not serving each other or the world more. So the first one is time and busyness. Which one of these relate to? Can you relate to? I'm too busy with work, family, and other commitments. We have busy lives. I'll do it when life slows down, but in fact it rarely does. I just don't have the margin or space in my schedule. All right, very real concern. How can we serve other people if we don't have the time? Sometimes it's focused more on our capability and confidence. You might say, I don't have the right gifts or skills. Someone else can do it better. I'm not trained or qualified to do that. Or I'm too introverted, or I'm too shy. Do any of those kind of resonate with you when you hear of a need? You think, I just don't have the ability to do that. How about this next one, resources? Serving is being a good steward of your time and your resources. So people might say, they might share this concern or this reason, I just don't have enough money to give. Or I can barely take care of my own needs and of my family, and you want me to expend more of my resources in serving? That's a very real concern. How about priorities and comfort? I need to focus on my own spiritual growth first. I really can't serve because I am busy just feeding myself spiritually. I need to take care of myself before helping others. Serving at church is enough. I don't need to do more of it outside of the church. So these are kind of issues of priorities. How about avoidance and burnout? It's easy to say things like, I've been hurt before when I tried to help. Kind of been there, done that. I have given a lot in the past, and I just kind of burned out. Nicole and I once served at a church that had a huge Passion Play production. And the rehearsal started right after New Year's, and it was just a monster of a commitment for time. And a lot of people just said that's Passion Play's my thing. And then the other 8 months of the year, they weren't as involved as they could have been or should have been because they just saw their commitment in that one thing. Or you might say, I've been hurt before. People haven't appreciated it. I don't want to enable people being dependent. People need to stand up on their own. So there's an avoidance there. How about discouragement? It doesn't seem to make a difference anyway. The people I'd served in the past, they didn't really appreciate it. The problems are too big for one person to address. So discouragement might keep us away from serving. Relational. I don't know anyone who needs help. There's often a lack of awareness. It's certainly not the reality. I wouldn't know how to approach someone in need. Those are kind of relational reasons. The last one is what kind of theological rationalization do we make for not serving? God is sovereign. He'll take care of people without me. Now, that might sound a little outlandish, but there's an element of that, I think. I'm focused on other kinds of ministry. We kind of hit on that one before. That's what the church and staff pastors are paid to do. Why am I serving when that's why we pay people to do that? How about this one? It's easy to kind of have this one creep in. Their sin brought on their problems. And again, I don't want to enable dependency. So these listed here, all these listed, most of these are very real and very understandable. And the truth is we need wisdom and discernment in balance. We can't serve at the expense of our family, obviously. But life is always going to have obstacles. If you're waiting for your life to line up in such a way where none of these things are an obstacle, that's not realistic. This is, in many ways, an issue of the heart. Where is your heart? It's not just an issue of your calendar and your checkbook, how busy you are or how much resources you've been entrusted with. It's an issue of the heart. So we're going to close our time maybe a little bit different. What is the heart of Jesus for each of these very real obstacles and these very real concerns that we asked? I'm going to ask you to ask God for his perspective on each of these issues. And the question ultimately is, what would Jesus say to you in response to each one of these questions? So we're going to sit and ponder these here tomorrow for the folks who are able to join us. And I'd ask you, if you're watching this at home, just to kind of sit and ponder this. What would Jesus say to you in response to all of these objections? Time and busyness. What does Jesus want to say to you in regards to this? I'm too busy with work, family, and other commitments. All right, what does God want to say to you about that objection? Again, we believe that God speaks for strengthening, encouraging, and comfort. What does God want to say to you in regards to that one objection? How about capability and confidence? The objection is, I don't have the right gifts or skills. Someone can do it better. What does God want to say to you in response to that objection or excuse, reason? How about this one, resources? I don't have enough money. I just barely take care of my own family's needs. Well, God promises to provide for us. But what does God want to say to you in that? This next one is priorities and comfort. I need to focus on my own spiritual growth. I need to take care of myself first. Or this idea of serving at church is enough. I don't need to do more of it outside of whatever you're doing here at the church. What does God want to say to you about that? How about this next one, avoidance and burnout? I've been hurt before when I tried to help, or I did a lot of it in the past. What do you think God's reply is to that objection. Discouragement. It doesn't seem to make a difference. Those I helped maybe didn't even appreciate it. What does God want to say to you in regards to that? Relational. I don't know anyone who needs help, or I wouldn't know how to approach them. What does God want to say to you in that? The last one was our kind of theological rationalization. God is sovereign. He'll take care of people without me. I'm focused on other kinds of ministry. That's what the church and staff pastors are paid to do, or maybe even their sin brought about their problems, or I don't want to enable dependency. The theological rationalization, what does God want to say to you about each of those statements? As we close, I just want to circle us back to the very first question that we asked. How does serving others help enable the transformation of my heart? How is serving good for you? Not just the people that you have an opportunity to help, but how is it good for you? And this is what I found is a great answer. Serving is essential for our spiritual growth because it shifts the focus away from our self-centeredness and actively mirrors the sacrificial love and humility of Jesus. It transforms an abstract faith into tangible action, moving us closer to God's character. Serving is good for others. Serving is good for us. We talk about imitating Jesus, and we might think living a sinless life is the best way to imitate Jesus, and certainly there's an argument. But how about maybe you're more like Christ when you're giving somebody a ride than you realize. Maybe you're more like Christ when you are being sacrificial, putting your own desires behind the needs of somebody else. A couple of closing questions to ponder. Which of the obstacles and concerns listed today resonate with you the most? Was there one that kind of hit you a little bit harder? And the last question is, how can you serve more intentionally? Who can you serve? And what names might even be coming to your mind right now? It's so important that we get our minds and our attention, I should say, off of ourselves. We talked about discipleship last week, and the mistake that discipleship is learning more. We can easily kind of just become this receptacle for knowledge, and discipleship really is living out our faith. So discipleship and serving are really tied together. I know we've said it so many times, the Dead Sea in Israel is the dead because it's the lowest place on earth. And when a location is the lowest place on earth, it is impossible for anything to flow out of it. It can only receive. It cannot flow out. And we can become dead just by receiving all the time without flowing out. And that serving is the opportunity for us to exercise our faith. So discipleship and serving really are tied together. If we want to be a disciple, we need to serve. So, all right. So again, thank you for joining us. Hopefully God's giving you some ideas on, not just ideas, but a desire to serve Him more intentionally. Again, thank you so much for watching. Take care. God bless.